The Witch, Scandent Season, Year 1.
Does someone smell something tasty?
Dennis, who had been walking several steps behind the two women and fiddling with a plastic-like brick emblazoned with stylized screaming faces, stopped dead in his tracks. Animated by the promise of travelers to belittle and possibly food, the Dark Lord sniffed the air several times, licking his dry lips. Sand had given way to once paved roads, broken and hinting at some greater civilization. Lorelei remembered books back home that had told of great roads and trains that carried not weapons but people. Perhaps there had been something similar here, once, though obviously long in the past. The ground was hilly and rough, and the path snuck around the hill unevenly, making it a real pain to get around. Mildred had deigned to push Lorelei around, although this really just meant occasionally steadying her wheelchair when the ground threatened to give away or the path got rough. And never physically, of course, when a helping and entirely supernatural hand would suffice.
Something does smell pretty nice,
Lorelei admitted. She had been trying to get Dennis to open up through patience, but the Dark Lord had refused to explain his mysterious contact to whatever nether realm he might or might not hail from.
Yeah, I know, right? Glad I picked it up with this keen sense of scent of mine.
Tiny wings fluttering vainly, Dennis pushed past Lorelei and tumbled down a bluff, screaming in confused terror that quickly faded as he realized he had only fallen a short distance. Lorelei shot the Dark Lord a grin he didn't return, but at least acknowledged.
Don't take my shortcut. You couldn't handle it, Gimpy.
Ignoring Dennis, Lorelei carefully traversed the shattered stone pavement beneath her, pausing to adjust her new hat as she did so. It was floppy and woven from pine needles and fibers, or what looked close enough to pines and needles that she had decided she could call them that. It didn't even have a very wide brim, and it wasn't particularly pointy, but the needles were a pleasant orange color she liked, at least.
It would be wise to be wary of that one,
Mildred cautioned, lips pursed.
Though I am surprised that he has not fled while we rest. His loyalty is fickle, as is my own. But you know this, and I suspect you have become used to the company of this self-proclaimed Dark Lord, Kindling. Yeah, I guess I have. The thing is, he's free to do what he wants, run away or betray me or whatever. I'm just glad to have made two friends, even if you two weren't whom I expected.
Mildred laughed throatily, wiping imaginary tears from her eyes.
Oh. How you hurt poor Mildred, for my delicate heart. Are you saying that you hadn't planned to meet a sweet and helpful crone such as I, and merely settled for me in consolation? Never would I have guessed.
Though Mildred wasn't particularly kind, she was straightforward in her own way, and strangely enough Lorelei found it refreshing. The witch wasn't asking for an answer or an apology, just teasing her because she could.
You've pretty much nailed it. I'd honestly been hoping for friends my age. A little younger, you know. Like Dennis, then. Not so much, no.
Lorelei smiled, and it faded as the hillside gave way to forested ground surrounded by flowers that seemed to shine in all the colors she had names for, and some she did not.
But settling implies that I don't like you, or that I don't even like Dennis. That you had to grow on me or something, like icky mold. I don't. That's not how I feel at all. If settling means changing your opinions to deal with the world, and making new friends because of it, then I think that's a good thing.
Mildred humphed in a manner that could express either approval or disapproval. She seemed to enjoy it, given the broad grin she sported as she did.
Very well. But, perhaps more importantly, I think it's time I told you the first lesson of true magic that I may. This is not the same as old magic, for even I am not that old, or that powerful, or that desperate.
Clucking dismissively, Mildred plucked several of the newly blooming flowers from the ground and crushed them in her wrinkled palm. Where they were moments ago, bright lights and seas of color burst into being, then disappeared as quickly, leaving behind only brightly colored sand.
Magic must be powered by something. For me, it is powered by several things, but mostly hatred. Perhaps dislike would be a better term.
The witch didn't seem too bothered by semantics, but nevertheless hovered solemnly above the unpaved dirt, where vibrant mauve grass grew. Lorelei turned her head to the side, and watched her companion slowly drop to the ground. Finally, Mildred shot her a wry grin.
Very patient of you. If you have a question, you may ask it. You must know I have no patience myself for those who dally. What is it about your magic that is powered by dislike, exactly? I don't get how that explains. Whatever you did to Dennis Associates back there, let alone how disliking something or someone can create stuff to eat.
The two resumed walking, a gentle breeze blowing past as they did.
Simple. You must think of magic creatively. Dislike is a powerful force, as powerful as magnetism, personal or otherwise. If you hate someone enough, it is trivial to force that hatred into their mind, and the results are a thing of beauty. Similarly, what is more proof of dislike than keeping those you disdain fed and watered, so that you may continue to observe their foolhardy waywardness?
Not entirely sure that she understood, Lorelei nodded her head, noticing that Mildred was watching her now.
The question then becomes, what do you find powerful? What shape does it take, and how do you generate it in yourself or others? I cannot tell you this thing, but I expect you to find it. But unfortunately, it looks as if the present interferes with the future, kindling.
Indeed, deep screams of terror once again rang throughout the gentle breeze, interspersed with the flailing of heavy arms and the thud of plants being thrown to the side, all the more impressive, given that they were in a clearing where even the tall grass only grew up to Lorelei's knees. Taking great care to make as much noise as possible, Dennis tumbled onto the ground towards them, then did another roll for good measure. He didn't leap to his feet with the agility of an acrobat, but Lorelei felt the effort was impressive, all the same.
There's some crazy psycho tribe on the island. I think they're gonna kill us and turn our skulls into goblets. You gotta take them out, Lorelei.
Crocodile tears, or possibly sweat, leaked from underneath the Dark Lord's sunglasses, and Lorelei placed a finger to her lips and thought.
Cannibals? That's pretty screwed up. I guess that might explain why we haven't seen anyone, but wouldn't cannibals eventually run out of food? I mean, if they ate everybody. And isn't most cannibalism kind of ritualistic, anyway? Stop talking and start getting ready to fight. I think their chief is coming for us. I don't wanna die.
Yelling and spitting in terror, Dennis positioned himself strategically behind Lorelei, who cast a glance to her side, where Mildred had been moments before, and now was not. Adjusting her hat, Lorelei took a deep breath and attempted to sound fierce.
Stop, cannibals. This guy is under my protection, and an attack against him is an attack not only against me, but his legion of demon servants.
But her words sounded feeble in the face of the storm of hoarse swearing drawing ever closer.
Teach you to try to abduct Boleslava, you little shit, I'll grind you into blood sausages and wring the marrow from your bones and...
Emerging, somewhat winded and unable to catch up even to Dennis, from the undergrowth was... Definitely, there was no mistaking it.
Hi.
Lorelei stuttered, smiling and blushing and frightened all at once.
I'm sorry if Dennis did something stupid. It's my bad. We haven't seen any, you know.
Humans, for a while. And the woman standing before her was older, sure, and looked a bit like one of the corporate suits that Lorelei had seen puttering around the facility from before, but she was human, to be sure. The stranger adjusted her tie, which was a bright red, and coughed several times.
Hey. Well. Hey.
Her fingers rubbed the back of her neck as a smile crept over her face, slowly at first, then cracking into a wide grin.
I guess it's only natural they sent a few kids over here. Tell Dennis that it's water under the bridge, okay? Dennis, it's water under the bridge.
Lorelei whispered to Dennis, who had stopped trembling in terror behind her and was now rolling his eyes from underneath his sunglasses. Lorelei could somehow tell, even though there was no way to be certain.
Gah, I heard the first time. What a girl, getting scared by some old fart.
The stranger turned to Dennis and snarled. It was about as terrifying as someone trying to be intimidating generally is, but as the Dark Lord quickly sank back into a defensive position, Lorelei tried and failed to hide her laughter.
Not funny, Lorelei, you didn't see her cannibal camp. Lorelei? Is that your name?
The stranger asked politely.
Yeah. And yours? It's very pretty, Lorelei. Since there's apparently some concern about me going down here, why not come with me? We can talk while we're there.
Though her question hadn't been answered, Lorelei gave a little smile and wheeled after her. And soon, though with some protest, so did Dennis. Not more than 20 minutes had passed when they arrived at a small clearing, where several rocks had been set around a small, yet cozy, fire. Buried up to her head in sand was the most charmingly rosy creature Lorelei had ever seen. It waved a tiny arm at Lorelei, as did the man sitting next to it and roasting something on the fire. Lorelei returned their waves, but couldn't help asking, all the same.
Dennis, how did you get cannibalism out of all this?
Silence greeted her question. The Dark Lord, who had returned to his time-honored tradition of not speaking when it suited his purposes, gave the bare minimum of effort necessary for a shrug.
Well, I guess I might have made it up. I just figured that a cannibal camp was more exciting than some old people in a weird pink thing.
Resisting the urge to find out if her inner focus was hate, Lorelei smiled sweetly and resolved to ignore Dennis in all matters of cannibalism from the future on. She wheeled over to the fire, and though the weather wasn't cold, the warmth from the heat felt pleasant indeed.
Ah!
The older woman loudly sighed as she flopped onto the ground and unearthed the tiny pink creature, who snuggled against her.
Mission, protect Boleslava from weird aggressor was definitely a success.
The man to Lorelei's right chuckled.
You didn't need to bury her in the sand, you know. I'm fairly certain just running after the guy would have been enough, what with how he was straining to get here and not be seen.
Dennis muttered something just loud enough to be audible about stealth, but everyone chose to ignore it. A brief round of introductions passed, and Lorelei quickly picked up that the cute creature went by Boleslava, and the polite guy with the glasses was Paul. But when she asked the stranger's name, first once, politely, and then the second time, politely, but firmly.
I guess I don't really know what my name is,
the stranger replied, stirring the fire with a stick. Tendrils of flame danced alongside it and dissipated into the wind.
Though I do remember not liking it, it meant absolutely nothing. Always thought it was a terrible name for parents to give their kid. Anyway. Doesn't matter. Lorelei. I've got something pretty important to ask you, if I might.
Lorelei shrugged, not entirely satisfied with the stranger's answer, but still drifting between the warm glow of the fire, and the strange and sudden feeling of companionship.
Would you mind if I tried to braid your hair? It's lovely, and I remember my mom doing my hair up like that, once. Ah, well, no problem, no problem.
She hadn't realized how quickly or firmly she had shaken her head until long after the stranger had stopped embarrassedly apologizing, face beet red. But Lorelei had remembered her mother, smiling when Lorelei had been younger and things hadn't been as bad. They had stood in front of a mirror that had seen better days and Margaret had told that her hair looked ridiculous, even though Lorelei had been so proud that she had cut it herself. Finally, Lorelei shook the memory and tried to smile.
I just like to deal with that myself, sorry.
Change the topic, change the topic.
So, do the two of you know each other?
It was a clumsy question, but to her relief, Paul seemed to pick up on how awkward she felt and took the question.
Nah. We knew each other from work, I mean, but I was here for a few months before you two arrived. The place kind of changes you, if that makes sense, and I figured that it was a good time for a fresh start.
Paul smiled, and took a sip from a strangely scented soda can.
Is there anyone else out there?
The stranger shook her head, the redness from before having vanished to be replaced with a wistful expression.
Not that I can tell. That doesn't mean we're entirely alone, of course, but if we are, it's pretty Spartan. I did see other travelers. In pretty rapid succession, too. But you're headed in the wrong direction if you want to meet them. You should head back the way you came, towards that tower complex. That being said, I've got this gut feeling, or got this gut feeling if you like.
Paul laughed at his own weak joke, then shrugged good-naturedly when no one else did.
You could come with us if you like. Paul's probably going to split off when he's found a place that doesn't set off his psyche karma or whatnot, but Boleslava and I are going to be looking for OU, her lost compatriot, Binky. And we could always use an apprentice on our adventure, right Boleslava?
Boleslava opened her eyes groggily, and let out a tiny yawn. She fixed Lorelei with a careful expression, and then shook her head.
It's okay, miss. You don't have to come with us, since you don't want to.
And then, with another barely audible sigh, Boleslava drifted back into semi-slumber.
You don't want to? Sorry if I was kinda pushy.
The stranger began, looking embarrassed again and fumbling in her pocket for something, but Lorelei cut her off.
It isn't that at all. I'm actually flattered by your kindness, and completely overwhelmed that I've seen other humans again. I know you two have already gotten used to it, but I kind of just assumed it'd be me. It'd always just be me.
Lorelei smiled softly, and after a while the stranger did too, through crooked and slightly off-color teeth.
But, my mentor isn't here, and I'll need to wait for her to return. She's capricious, harsh, and a little bit cruel, but she's also an amazing teacher, and if she ended up disappearing because she had felt I left her behind, that'd be terrible.
The stranger smiled softly, warming her hands by the fire.
Must be nice to have a pupil who's as devoted as you are. Well, Lorelei, you're welcome to stay here as long as you like. And I hope that we run into one another again, soon.
Lorelei was amazed how quickly the three packed up, and even more amazed, and a little embarrassed, when the stranger kept on trying to pester Paul to part with enough supplies to outfit an entire army composed of multiple copies of Dennis. Though Paul seemed willing enough, Lorelei refused firmly but politely, and waved until the three vanished into the distance, the stranger looking over her shoulder and waving in return long after she was a dot on the horizon. The moment that the three were gone, Mildred popped back into existence near the embers of the fire, the magic concealing her dissipating into the embers and imbuing them with a new life, one strong enough to heat a good cup of tea, despite the fact that the witch could simply materialize one as warm or cold as she liked.
It was good you chose not follow that one, kindling. She has a fate about her that I do not like. She ignores it with the single-minded reaction of those who fear the present, and this is unwise.
Lorelei frowned, and narrowed her eyes.
Never thought you would be one for jealousy, Mildred.
But the witch's normal mischievous tone had all but vanished, and she simply watched the fire dance with a blank expression.
Of the many things I feel, jealousy is not one of them. Not now, at least. But there is a wrongness to her that I wonder if she can even perceive, and whatever fate she finds, I do not envy her for it.
Lorelei felt an unpleasant chill creep down her spine, and tried to hide it with a quick smile.
So, hey. Did you hear what I said about you? I realize it wasn't much, but...
Mildred snorted into the fire, though with a tiny amount of pride.
I wasn't aware that I needed such idle praise, though if you wish to continue to announce such trivialities to those you meet, I will not be opposed.
Lorelei beamed at the witch, who chose to look away rather than face the young woman who was grinning at her from ear to ear. As the fire died out, Lorelei came to a realization and placed a hand on Mildred's shoulder. The witch turned to face her quizzically, waiting.
I think. If magic comes from the self, I think I want mine to be fueled with friendship. I know that sounds silly, but if I can make friends with you and even Dennis, maybe it's possible for that to turn into magic.
Mildred replied with a half smile and a shrug, and that was enough for Lorelei.
Hey. Lorelei.
Dennis shambled over, frowning bitterly.
You've been ignoring me the entire time, as usual. No, I haven't. Yes you have.
Lorelei shook her head slowly.
No. I've watched you move further away from the fire by the minute, mumbling to yourself, the way you keep glancing at people like you're angry at them, but you don't want to approach them about it. I've watched you watched us, Dennis. I just don't know what to say, either.
The Dark Lord's anger choked up in his throat, and he couldn't figure out what to say. Lorelei felt mildly proud of herself, but didn't allow the satisfaction of dwelling on it.
Dennis, even if we can't ever really be friends, since we're stuck here together until you choose to go back to whatever you call home. Not happening. Even though I know you'll have to handicap your awesome power to get down on my level, let's do the best we can.
He wasn't smiling, and he didn't stop scratching his gut. But Dennis gave a short, terse nod.
What the hell? Even a scrub like you shouldn't have to go through this place without seeing how amazing I am. I mean, you've seen Mildred, she's pretty much useless and unreliable. I'm very reliable, so there's 1 point for me already. Bam!
Mildred was not even trying to hide her amusement, but at least had the self-control not to laugh.
Thanks, Dennis.
Dennis made a non-committal noise that was intended to sound cool and aloof but sounded sort of like a mosquito fart, crossed his arms, and went back to playing with the same weird device that he had refused to let her interact with just yet. Fingers tapping at ridiculously tiny keys with even more ridiculous speed, a blur of gray. Lorelei smiled and stared into the sky. She had been here a long time, now, hadn't she? And even if things hadn't gone entirely how she had wanted them to go, they had gone better than she could have hoped. Maybe back home. Maybe things were going okay there, too. Good cheer filled Lorelei's spirit as Dennis finished tapping with a self-satisfied smirk, and the chirpy caterwauling of an off-pitch but strangely captivating song began to play from his brick. With her friends at her side, it felt as if nothing could go wrong. And even if something did go wrong, they'd be able to face it. Together. Chapter end.